18 hours and 40 minutes in the air. That is the longest airline flight in the world. Singapore to New York nonstop, 9,537 miles without touching the ground, and each of the pilots on board spends 6.5 of those hours off duty in a hidden bedroom that most of the 161 passengers will never find. This is how pilots actually sleep on 16-hour and longer ultra-long haul flights. Because the room is the easy part. The hard part is what happens at 38,000 feet on the night a pilot climbs into that bunk and cannot fall asleep at all. Start with why the extra pilots exist in the first place. Under United States federal aviation rules, a standard 2-pilot crew is capped at 9 hours of flight time, and depending on when the duty starts, sometimes only 8. Add a 3rd pilot and an approved rest facility and the limit climbs to 13 hours. Add a 4th pilot and it climbs to 17. If you drive a truck, you already know this logic in your bones. It is the same reason your logbook cuts you off at 11 hours behind the wheel and forces 10 consecutive hours off duty. Aviation solved the layover problem differently. Instead of parking the vehicle, they put the bedroom on board and swapped the drivers in flight. On the Singapore to New York run, that means 4 pilots on every departure, 2 full captains and 2 first officers, and at any given moment, 2 of them are flying while 2 of them are horizontal behind a locked door. But here is the catch that surprises people. The law does not just count heads. It certifies the bedroom itself, and the quality of that bedroom legally changes how long the airplane is allowed to keep flying. Regulators sort onboard rest into 3 classes. Class 3 is a reclining seat in the cabin. Class 2 is a lie-flat seat screened off by a curtain. Class 1 is a genuine bunk in a separate compartment, isolated from the flight deck and from the passengers, and only Class 1 unlocks the longest duty periods. With 4 pilots and a Class 1 bunk, a duty day can legally stretch to 19 hours. Downgrade the same crew to Class 3 seats and the ceiling drops to 15.5. That is 3.5 hours of range decided entirely by the quality of a mattress. So where is this room? On most wide-body jets, it sits directly above the cabin ceiling, behind an unmarked door near the cockpit that opens to a code and a steep ladder. Inside, there is standing room only at the entry, then a bunk roughly 6.5 feet long and just over 2 feet wide. The mattress has a seatbelt stitched across it because turbulence does not care that you are off duty. There is a reading light, a temperature control, an interphone wired to the flight deck, a smoke detector, and a drop-down oxygen mask above the pillow. It is a berth, not a hotel, and it has no window on purpose. Any sleeper cab veteran would recognize the philosophy immediately. Everything you need, nothing you do not, and every item justified by a failure it prevents. Now the schedule that runs inside it. On the New York run, the 4 pilots split the flight into rest blocks, typically 1 block of around 4 hours and a second block of around 2.5 hours per man. The order is not polite negotiation. Federal Rule 117.17 requires that the pilot physically flying the landing gets at least 2 consecutive hours of rest in the second half of the flight, and the monitoring pilot gets at least 90 minutes. The system is built backward from the runway. Whoever touches down in New York must arrive at the top of descent as fresh as the schedule can make him. Even the handoff is choreographed. Rest blocks start only after the climb is finished and end before the descent briefing. The pilot coming back on duty gets a full update on fuel state, weather, and traffic before he straps back in, and the bunk gets fresh linens between occupants. Nothing about it is casual because a sloppy handoff at 38,000 feet costs more than a missed logbook entry ever did. That is the machine, and it works. If you want more plain answers about how working crews survive brutal schedules, subscribe and tell me in the comments the longest run you have ever slept through, because those runs are exactly what this channel is built for. But the machine only moves the real problem. It cannot make a human body cooperate, and at cruise altitude, the body has 4 enemies working against it at once. First, thin air. The cabin is pressurized to the equivalent of 6,000 feet on a modern Airbus A350, closer to 8,000 on older jets, so every breath of sleep carries slightly less oxygen. Second, dryness. Cruise humidity falls to around 10%, drier than most deserts. Third, noise. The bunk sits inside a constant wash of engine and airflow sound in the range of 75 decibels, about a vacuum cleaner running beside the pillow all night. Fourth, and worst by far, the clock. Singapore to New York crosses roughly 12 time zones, so a pilot's body can insist it is 2 in the afternoon at the exact moment the roster orders sleep. Aviation science has a name for that danger. The window of circadian low runs from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. body time, the hours when alertness bottoms out and most fatigue-related mistakes happen. The airlines measured all of this. When Qantas ran its 19-hour research flights from New York to Sydney in 2019, pilots wore EEG sensors that recorded their brainwaves in the bunk. Sleep at altitude is real but degraded. It is lighter, more fragmented, and shorter on deep sleep than the same hours on the ground. A 4-hour rest block reliably produces less than 4 hours of actual sleep. The schedule assumes this. It books more rest than the body will collect, the same way a fuel plan carries reserves it hopes never to burn. Which brings us back to the opening question. What happens on the night the bunk does not work, when a pilot lies strapped to that narrow mattress over the Arctic with his eyes open for the entire block? The first layer of defense is timing. Crews are woken well before they are needed because sleep inertia leaves the brain measurably impaired for up to 30 minutes after waking, and nobody wants that brain intercepting a glide slope. The second layer is the emergency nap. In 1994, NASA researchers found that a planned nap averaging just 26 minutes in the seat improved crew performance by 34% and alertness by 54%. Under ESA, one pilot may take controlled rest in his cockpit seat for up to 45 minutes while the other flies. American rules refuse to allow it. And the final layer is the blunt one. A pilot who reports himself too fatigued to land is pulled from the landing because there is a second full captain on board who can take it. That is the real answer, and it is hiding in every serious machine you have ever worked on. The 4-man crew is not a comfort feature, it is redundancy, engineered exactly like a backup hydraulic circuit or the APU bolted behind your cab. The system does not assume sleep will succeed, it assumes sleep will partially fail, and it carries enough spare human capacity that the failure never reaches the runway. And then there is the part nobody expects. Ask long-haul crews where they get their deepest sleep, and a surprising number will not say home. They will say the bunk. Total darkness. A steady hum like a white noise machine the size of an airplane. A gentle rocking motion at cruise. No phone reception, no kids, no dispatcher. Nothing that can reach you for 4 scheduled hours over the Pacific. Crews describe bunk sleep on a smooth night as the most protected rest of their working lives. If you have ever slept harder in a sleeper cab with the bunk heater humming than in your own bed, you already understand it. The most extreme workplaces do not always produce the worst sleep. Sometimes they produce the best. So the next time a wide-body crawls across the night sky 7 miles over your head at 3 in the morning, picture what is actually up there. 2 pilots at the controls with their rest already banked. 2 more horizontal in a certified steel bedroom above the passengers, belted to a mattress, sleeping on a schedule written by federal law and checked against brainwave data. Every hour of that flight was staffed backward from the landing, the same way a good driver plans a mountain descent before he starts the climb. The passengers below call it comfort. The 2 men asleep upstairs know better. It is not a miracle. It is a checklist, and it was completed before the wheels ever left Singapore.